So for those people, Mike, and you have been around this area consulting and working in and delivering solutions, for those people who do not know what blockchain is, could you make it really simple for them?
Absolutely. So blockchain is just another method that you could be able to share data and information with parties that you may not fully trust with specific information, just not the whole thing. So example is, let's use hospitals, for example, and let's do it internationally, right? You can take like Health and Human Services from the United States. You can take NHS in UK. You can take the Ministry of Health of Australia. Let's just say they all want to interoperate with specific COVID-19 data and information, but they don't want to give out all of their database and information because that could conspire or share price gouging information or data related to advertisements and personal health information and individual data that you don't really want to share with everyone, but the specific information related to how many patients are going through COVID and how many resources you need to be able to send to each country, that is valuable for each participant. And so blockchain is a way where you can share specific information, protect the rest of the information from cryptography, and be able to interact with multi-parties or multi-individuals or organizations. And so there's kind of two versions of it. There is the enterprise version where it's more permissioned, and this is still a centralized type of model where you're asking to be part of the party or asking to be part of the network or database or protocol, as they call it. And you then are able to interact on specific data points that are granted and given to that group. Then there's the fully decentralized one. And fully decentralized blockchains are the ones that are, that are mostly referred to as cryptocurrencies, and how individuals or specific organizations will have public access to specific funds, data, and information. Yet, in order to access that public key, you must enter in a key that can cryptographically get you into that method. And what that means is it's kind of like a secret key into a lockbox, right? If you have this public key that can get into the cryptography, you're then able to enter into the network. So blockchain is a way where you could be able to bring parties together that may not typically have been able to do so in sharing data information and even financial information. It's a new method where today we have specific platforms and protocols that own majority of our information and data. Like Google owns a lot of your search data. Facebook owns a lot of your photos and a lot of your personal connections and information. And you don't see an avenue where Facebook's able to interoperate with Twitter or able to interoperate with other social platforms. But in a blockchain network, you could be able to potentially send out details associated to your profile without having to actually send your actual name or the data that will compromise you. And blockchain is just a method where you can be able to trust parties that may not have been able to trust each other together before.
So why is blockchain generating so much interest? Is it because it's associated with cryptocurrency? Is it that it really is secure? Because you mentioned cryptography a couple of times in your last answer. Is it that you can transport a certain amount of data, but not other bits of data? Because you could do that with web pages at the moment. Or is it that you could, and I think you were alluding to this, and Satya Nadal said this a couple of months ago, are you alluding to the fact that you don't own your data, but a future point in time you could own your data, it could be stored on a blockchain, and then you could securely release parts of that to whomever you want and monetize it?
They all kind of intersect together. So as an individual, right, you don't own any of that data. The platform companies own that. And so blockchain gives you a way to be able to have individual ownership. And this is where the function of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, really come into play. NFTs are more or less computationally verifiable files that you have on your computer. So you could verify a JPEG, you can verify an MP4, an MP3, a video file, right, that you created on your local device. And in these type of NFT marketplaces, they show and they timestamp that Mike McCoy created this piece of content on this date in August of 2021. And then he was able to put that on marketplaces and showcase that, and this is the worth of it, right? This is why it's really gained in popularity, because the platform companies have been owning and monetizing your data without your consent or without your permission to do so, and all these different exchanges of data, right? And so That's why blockchain is really considered a network, because it goes beyond just the web page or database that you're familiar with or used to today. It interchanges many different databases. It goes from many to many instead of one to many in the relationship. And so NFTs then can validate that you are the person and you were the original owner of this file, right? And then someone can create a copy of that, right? But if you actually have the timestamp and the actual IP and the information that's associated to the original device where that thing was created, you then have ownership of that. And that's why there's such a boom right now with NBA Top Shot and CryptoPunks and some of these platforms that are taking art that was originally created by someone from their actual local device, and they're able to sell that and showcase, yeah, I was actually the original person. Because art and creative media and digital files is really up to the eye of the beholder, right? Like I could copy something on Google and then reformat the picture and then put it on a platform and say it was mine. But if you're familiar with social media memes and platforms and how people communicate, a lot of memes and a lot of files are interchanged consistently, and it goes to so many different exchanges where you're not really sure who the actual owner is. Blockchain enables you to guarantee more ownership as well as individuality when it comes to showcasing these. So when it comes to companies using NFTs and things like this, it's more of this organization represents this piece of art or this piece of digital file, and then they're trying to either sell it or they're trying to just verify that they were the person who had it over time, right? So recently Visa, the credit card company, they actually purchased a CryptoPunk piece of digital art that was created generatively. So there's a deeper meaning of something called generative art, where you tell a piece of software how to make specific art, and then it originally creates it for you in this weird kind of concept. Visa purchased an NFT, I think, for a couple millions of dollars, and they're not selling it per se. They're saying we are the creators and the original stores of value of this piece of art. So therefore, that's why it's valuable, because we are a part of it. Blockchain is really taken off with the NFT format because of this notion that platform companies can have control of all digital files and all digital art and all things in the digital world. For the most part, in the physical world, a lot of our land and a lot of the ownership when it comes to, as I said, land, real estate, cars, actual physical belongings, that's either owned by the federal government or it's owned by a handful of companies that isn't owned by you, the person, right? A lot of individuals in the United States and across the world actually don't have ownership of many things, but in the digital world, you can have ownership of many things and be able to verify it, and you're kind of unlimited in your scope. The only limit you have is terabytes of bandwidth, right? But we'll get to that later. But the digital world is now like the new frontier, not the wild, wild west. It's an ability to be able to create more digital art that couldn't be created in the real world. And that's why people are spending so many millions of dollars of value, because this is their way to be able to hold and store value and be able to escape from the barriers and the limitations that maybe the physical world has put on them financially. And it's a new method to be able to interact.
So how do I monetize that? So let's say, for example, I'm Visa. I've bought this certificate that essentially tells me I am the sole owner of this particular digital asset. How do I monetize it? Or is there something else going on here? It's non-monetary. There's something else involved, because I'm surprised people would spend money if they weren't trying to make more money from that spend.
Exactly. A lot of times they are trying to make more money onto it. So it's just like baseball cards or football, soccer player cards that you may own over time, right? So you'll buy that collectible and you'll say, hey, I think this is worth a lot of value now, but as I hold on to it, the value may increase, or I could be able to sell it off at some point for a higher profit. That's absolutely what's going on with these NFTs as well. And there's marketplaces like OpenSea and Digital Bazaar and other platforms that allow you to then put it on a marketplace and sell it to other people who also may believe that your art or your collectible or your digital file is valuable as well. People are doing it for charity. People are doing it for later value, just like you would a baseball card or something that would be that would gain in value later. Bitcoin in itself is a cryptocurrency that is the digital gold reserve, where if you're not trusting how the fiat, whether there's too many dollars being put into the market or there's too few of dollars being put in the market, you can go to Bitcoin and say, my money is always going to be at least somewhat valued to the digital world, and that's where I'm going to put my safe haven of money into there. Then there's other applications though, like Ethereum, and Ethereum is a platform where you not only can store value in cryptocurrency, but data is your value point. And the more data you can interchange within a platform like Ethereum, and there's many other ones out in the world too, you can then be able to exchange monetary value not only through crypto but through these different forms of value too.
Well, you mentioned a moment ago decentralized finance. Just explain that in a little bit more detail. Are you saying that we will all own our own currency and there'll be no government bodies? Because the one query would have about that, where central bodies can be irritating and take a cut, and that's never nice if it's a large cut. They actually provide governance, and they provide faith in a system, and they provide dispute resolution and everything else in between. Those are the really good positives, and we have to pay for those. So explain decentralized finance, and also who would solve some of the potentially inevitable disputes that will arise at a later date.
Absolutely. So that brings up two terms I will mention. There's DeFi, which is decentralized finance. Then there's a term called DALs. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So in DeFi, the main principle is any participant or organization that is in decentralized finance, they don't have to go to a third party or a bank to be able to interchange cryptocurrency or whatever their fiat or digital store of value is, right? And so, as you mentioned, there are some ways where using a third party, like a central bank or like any bank or service in general, could be able to help out with that governance. Decentralized finance is where individuals may be able to take ownership of their finances in crypto methods to be able to exchange with anyone in the world, no matter what the border is, right? So that can both be good and that can both be bad. So there's obviously terrorist organizations that can be able to use this decentralized finance networks that are fully anonymous. And there's a couple platforms like Monero and others where you could be pseudo-anonymous. None of your details are actually mentioned in how you're exchanging. You're just exchanging cryptocurrency and money through these platforms and networks. That's the bad side of it. The good side of it, though, is for people like in third world countries or in parts of Africa that may not be able to receive many dollars or wealth because of their government affiliation or wars in between when it comes to currency, and maybe inflation rates like in Venezuela are so high that their dollar or monetary value isn't worth much now. That gives people that have access to Wi-Fi or have access to a mobile phone or have access to a web page, be able to interact and exchange value, exchange money that they could exchange to their national currency to be able to get food and water and other things like that. So there's both the good and the bad. There's extremes when it comes to DeFi.
Well, so to distribute ownership, though, then everybody surely would have to have some form of cryptocurrency. But as I understood it, Bitcoin is limited in volume. And that's partly what's driving the huge swings and fluctuations in its value. How can people be part of this decentralized economy if A, they can't be part of it because there isn't enough Bitcoin to go round, or B, the fluctuations and the chips that you need to buy in at the front instance could be 20, 30, 40, or some are predicting $300,000 per Bitcoin at some point in time. Surely that excludes a lot of people from participating in this more egalitarian, more libertine society that you're mentioning.
Absolutely. So there's many other ways besides just owning crypto that you can be able to earn value into these networks. You can, one, interact more. So by texting, messaging, doing actual physical work for the governance of the group, building websites. If you have a skill like that, a lot of DAOs and organizations will be able to then repay you for your creation or your work. That's why a lot of artists right now, they're actually creating NFTs and they're creating JPEGs and they're creating files of work to others that they could be able to sell on these platforms and marketplaces. If they didn't have any crypto, it doesn't matter because once they put the NFT or their digital creation on the marketplace, they can then be exchanged in crypto and value for that. So you don't actually have to have origin of crypto, as long as you have digital skills and ways that you can be able to enhance a network or enhance a protocol. Then there's even non-technical ones. Like if you're able to communicate and make calls or do sales for these specific protocols, that's even a way you could be able to receive token ownership too, and crypto ownership and distribution too. You think of like the type of job at any corporation someone has, even HR, there's sales, there's legal things that a lot of these companies have to go over, right? If you're a lawyer and you're able to help organize the contracts and organize the governance structure, and you can be able to put that into terms that is relevant to your either universal or geographic jurisdiction, you can be able to receive crypto too. The only thing is you have to be able to create what is called a digital wallet or a self-sovereign identity, a digital representation of yourself so that people know and how to address and send crypto and send these funds to you. But that is relatively minor in these type of formats. But it's not just technical skills, it's many of the things you can be able to contribute to these DAOs and these networks. And I think a lot of those opportunities are now forming and growing as these networks and protocols.
Where does blockchain sit these days in terms of company priorities, in terms of actually being an infrastructure or place where real value is being transacted? Why doesn't every company have a blockchain? You know, what is actually happening in the market in general, Mike?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for a lot of enterprises, it's really hard for them to understand how they can interoperate or how they can work with participants and companies that may be viewed as our competition. And that's why a lot of the governance and negotiation talks haven't really happened, or the networks and the collaboration that we once dreamed of in 2017 may not have come to fruition as much now. It's really hard for centralized organizations, and we've been centralized now for many decades in the way we operate. And because the method is like blockchain and DeFi and all these things are part of something called Web 3.0, where individuals have more ownership. They can be able to delegate and interoperate with people in a seamless way. Web 2.0 is what we were in with the ages of Google, Facebook, Amazon. And in Web 2.0, the more data you as an individual have and the more you accumulate, the more you can be able to sell out that data and information, and you generate wealth from that, right? But it's hard for you to share well. And so for enterprises, it's hard for them to imagine how they could share well and still make a profit, and still be protected and secure too. And a lot of times with these major enterprise companies, if they were to use blockchain, and sometimes depending on your protocol, depending on your network and what you use, it's hard for someone to combine, like, yes, there's public blockchains that are out there that are fully decentralized, but there are more permissioned centralized blockchains, and using the centralized permission blockchains are relevant for interacting with multi-parties, but a lot of times you're still doing a centralized process, and it's just not worth creating the mechanism if you're just going to be centralized as it is. It has to be a very big C-level leadership mindset to go from centralized to decentralized. And I think that is part of the reason why you haven't seen major enterprises get into it. If you are an enterprise, though, that runs creator economies, such as brands, such as media, such as outlets like that, that's where you're able to then give individuals the ability to then create things on your platform and then get reimbursed in crypto and things like that. We've seen a lot of that come out this past year because NFTs are more mainstream. But in the future, I definitely see decentralized autonomous organizations coming and making decisions for companies and enterprises and governments on specific issues where maybe the stakeholders or the people that run the company don't have the perfect expertise to make that decision, and they'll give it to a DAO or they give it to a separate entity to kind of make that. As well as there's something in crypto worlds called the Metaverse. The Metaverse is this fully decentralized land, and it's a fully virtual land where you're in virtual reality and you interact with people in these worlds, and you're able to exchange crypto, and everything is decentralized, and there's no full owner of it other than the people who run your bandwidth and run your things like that. There's a lot more creator economies that are forming from this type of work and from this type of world that is going to grow in the future, and I find that very interesting.
So I know Zuckerberg recently mentioned that Facebook's future is in the metaverse. What is it in your eyes do you think is going to drive mass scale adoption of blockchain, or will it always be relatively niche, techie, or specialized?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, in the near-term future, it will always be niche, techie, and specialized, because not everyone wants to own their financial information, and not everyone wants to have individual ownership of their finances. There are plenty of people based in English-speaking countries, in the United States, in the UK, and everywhere, that are completely fine with how the methods of their financial history data are exchanged, and they don't want to change anything about that. So I think there's a big generational gap where we're still going to have those generations want to operate in the traditional methods that they have. The big flip will be if the current fiat currencies in the world are too inflated and they're not pertaining a lot of value. I think it'll be more financial that it will become mainstream than anything else, right? So as well as when it comes to personal data and personal data ownership, if the platform companies cannot prove that they are trustworthy and that they're doing the right thing with your data and information and how it's being used, and people don't trust them, as they don't trust them now, but as more and more people become more digitally aware about data ownership and rights, I could see the metaverse, these decentralized worlds, becoming more prevalent. It will become more mainstream, mostly in the financial sector, because that's where it's more easier to probably think about and easier to exchange. But there's tons of ways it could really go. I didn't think NFTs would take off like they did this past year. You have to think that, yeah, the more people are sitting at home and the more people are not able to interact due to COVID-19 and other type of viral infections, then they will be interacting more with interfaces and computers. But it'll be interesting to see what really pops in the world in the future.
Maybe that metaverse will occur sooner than we actually think, and we'll all be buying $2,000 kittens on.
There's a lot of people on Decentraland and other platforms that are only interacting in virtual reality, because for one part, their physical world, their physical interactions may not have been as beneficial to them as they have had on the internet. And so a lot of people that may be introverted or may not feel accepted in general society will go to the metaverse and maybe find a family and maybe find an identity and things that they couldn't in the real world.
Your final thoughts then, just out loud. Blockchain originally was sold as a secure platform. But with quantum computing coming now at a rate of knots, and whilst I'm not suggesting we'll have quantum laptops on our desktops in the next year or two, the servers and the infrastructure upon which big corporations or governments operates really will have commercialized quantum chips. That potentially causes or signals a problem for blockchain, where you could use a range of quantum computers to break into the algorithm. Do you think the blockchain society or economy will cope? And if so, how? Or do you think that's going to put a real spike in the blockchain, or the explosion of blockchain and all of the uses that banks or other financial institutions or governments hope to use it for?
It's an interesting thought. It's a big fear in these worlds. I'm not a trained cryptographer. I'm an applied researcher with cryptography, so take this for what it is. But there's a lot of research in quantum resistant cryptography with a lot of the big players such as Intel, NVIDIA, ARM, and the chip makers in the world, that I think the ones that obviously have the most money and the most resources will be able to combat those type of methods. But for different cryptography, like most of blockchain is based on this cryptography called SHA-256. A lot of that's already been matured and discussed in many protocols of how we could be able to get with the times and be able to have quantum resistant cryptography. I think at first there will be a method where there's going to be a lot of ransomware and crypto attacks and account attacks when it first starts. But as the cryptography and resources learn more about how these networks and functions grow, I think that you'll find more the bigger institutions that will be able to protect you more than not. I don't see it being a catastrophic event where certain countries have the quantum computing talent and then they're taking advantage of other ones that don't. I don't think there's going to be quantum wars per se. I think there'll be a lot of regulation. I think government, especially in the Western world and in Russia and in China, are very much ahead of these curves and have actually showcased and shared a lot of their progress too. And there's some private sector companies that are really standing out in these areas as well. I think for the most part we'll be fine, but there will be more harm in the beginning than there will be security and safety in the long run.
Always the way with technology, isn't it? The nefarious jump in and prey on the ignorance of others. I suppose one thing out loud, that's maybe one of the things we enjoy about central entities. Visa, for example, are responsible for the security and recovering it. I'm not sure if I would like to be too responsible for my own security when it comes to digital or quantum or anything else. Mike, appreciate your time today. For those people, Mike, who want to get in touch and learn a little bit more about the things that you do, what's the best method for people to say hello, engage, connect, or learn a little bit more, but not attack you cryptography-wise or quantum-wise?
That's hilarious. I'm at Twitter at MCCoy. It's EMCEECOY, and there's an underscore under at the end of that. You can find me. I'm on LinkedIn as well at Mike McCoy. You type in Mike McCoy Humanity, you can find me there. I'm very open to messaging people on LinkedIn often, as well as if you want to have like more conversations with open groups and working groups, every 2 weeks at 10 a.m. Eastern time, we actually have a Hyperledger healthcare special interest group meeting. We have about 20 to 30 individuals that are very involved in healthcare and blockchain that we come and we have an hour-long session. We discuss many different topics. We also have working groups that work on specific projects too. I'm very highly interactive in that group. But yeah, mostly Twitter and LinkedIn, I think, are the best communication methods.
Super. I'll add the contact details in the body of the message as well. Mike, thank you so much for today. I appreciate that, your time. I've learned tons and I can't wait to get this video out. I'll see you soon, sir.
Thank you, Kieran.